I've got 10 minutes to tell you what post-seed is, so I'm going to go a little fast today. I've also had 3 cortados, my favorite new drink. So first of all, I think people all get this now. Seed is not an event like a round. It's a process, and most people raise multiple rounds of seed. They may be several cap converts and all that. This is a convenient way to think about it. There's this fluffy money pre-seed, less than $250,000 cumulative coming out of an incubator accelerator program. Then there's the institutional seed round that most of you will get. That usually is cumulative, still less than $2 million. The stats say, you saw earlier, about $1 million to $1.25 million by now. And then there's post-seed. That's an increasing part of this whole thing. And post-seed will tend to be $2 to $3 million, maybe a little more. But cumulative, you're still less than $5 million. And what I want to explain is this. Post-seed looks like a stage. It's not. It's actually a very clever strategy. And the whole point of post-seed is not to get to an A round. It's to get to a supersized A round. So for convenience, think of post-seed as the Big Mac of seed rounds. All right. There's a lot of chatter about how A rounds have shifted. Now, traditionally, and years ago, some lawyer put an A on the first preferred stock round. I don't know who that person was. They could have made it a 1. They could have made it blue, red, green. They picked A. So A rounds got enshrined. And they were always the first institutional round of investing. So here's a lot of people talking about this. If a institutional seed fund puts money in, why isn't that an A round? Well, Naval has the best answer here. Look what Naval says. The traditional venture industry want to tell their limited partners, we do A rounds. The A round today is not the first institutional money, but they don't want to say that. So we have found the most clever, the smartest founders will tend to try to gamify the system. They'll do anything they can to avoid putting A on all these multiple stages of seed funding. Series Seed, Series AA, Series A1. So they can still go to the traditional venture guys and get a traditional, quote-unquote, A round. The structural reason for this, obviously, it takes a lot less money to get started today, but what may not be less obvious is the traditional venture funds are still fairly large, $300, $500, $800 million. They can't do $500,000 checks at any type of scale. Keith talked about how Costa's got a seed fund. They sort of dabble in seed, but their core fund doesn't do that. They can't write the small check. So therefore, you can do multiple stages of seed before you try to get the big check. Now, something else is going on, and it's because of Marc Andreessen. He also understands the shifting nature of the A. None of these guys are fooled. They know if you raise $3, $4, $5 million in seed rounds and you come to them, you're not really asking for an A. But he's the guy that really pushed the supersized A on the market. He's also gamifying a system. So let's talk a little more about this. Marc Andreessen realized something, and he's talked about it to the Wall Street Journal. It's called the Rule of 15. The theory is every year there's 10 or 15 deals worth investing in. Now here's what the problem is. You don't know in advance. So Andreessen Horowitz had this brilliant idea that, well, there's only 10 or 15 of them. We have a $3 billion set of money. Let's get in every one. So what they do is they pay up to try to get in every one of the emerging supersized A's so they can buy their way in. And for his fund, it's a really interesting strategy. Now, I've looked into a lot of detail if this is a good idea or not. There's a group called Play Bigger that is one of the advisors to Bullpen, and they've done a very interesting analysis. What they have found is in the current era, the time to go from zero to serious market cap, in a way from zero to becoming a category killer, is 3 times faster than it was 15 years ago. What this means is the idea of Andreessen Horowitz to pay up in the supersized A to get in makes perfect sense because not only, they may be paying a high valuation, but they think the company's going to skyrocket much more quickly to a unicorn billion-dollar level. So this all makes sense if there really is a rule of 15. Now, it turns out the same smart guys who figured out how there's a gamification going on of the A round also have asked the question, is there really a rule of 15? In the old days, it was mostly technology getting funded to sell to techies. But Marc Andreessen's been pointing out that we're now tackling cabs and transportation. We're tackling food. The tech industry is now expanding its markets way beyond selling tech to techies. Maybe there's more a rule of 50. I don't have the data on the board, but I looked into where did this rule of 15 come from anyway. It turns out one of the benchmark founders, who's now teaching at Stanford, Andy Ratcliffe, did a study, and he looked at all the deals that made over $100 million of revenue as a company between 1985 and 2005. And he found it averages around 10 to 15 a year, every year over that period, and that's where it came from. Now, I wanted to get into his data, but apparently he's lost the data. The dog ate his homework or something. I asked myself, is this really so? So there's a really interesting story I heard. I learned a lot from it by a guy named Masayoshi Son, who started SoftBank. If you don't know him or SoftBank, he became a billionaire brilliantly years ago. And he said what got him all his net worth was this. In 1987, he had made some money, but didn't know what to do with it. So he invested in all the top 40 PC-era companies. It would have been names, obviously, Intel and Microsoft. He would have also put it into Novell and a lot of names, Borland, lost in history. He made 40 times as money in the next 10 years. I said, this is really interesting. That means if you go back to the PC era, which is really the first bubble in venture, there probably were only 40 businesses worth investing in. Yeah, there might have been 50 disk drive companies funded, but only one or two actually emerged after the competitive battle, Seagate. How many operating system companies survived? Word processing and so forth. So maybe there were 40 good companies back then. So after the 2000 bubble, I did the same analysis. And I said, okay, how many companies coming out of the bubble in 2000 are worthy of investing in and will be like the 40 were in 1987? I got to 200. 200 businesses worth funding during the dot-com bubble. They eventually became all the companies we still remember. They've consolidated down to about 100. Okay, so let's put it together. Let's say there were 40 really good rule of 15 companies in the 80s and 200 in the 90s. So 240 over that 20-year period. You get on average 10 to 15 a year. The problem is venture doesn't work on averages. When Aileen Lee did her study on unicorns, which I'm sure you've all read, she only found 39 unicorns, billion-dollar companies, between 2013 back to 2004 in that 10-year period. Okay, 39 divided by 10 is 4. Is there a rule of 4? What you realize is during the bad times in venture, you might only get 4 a year. During the good times, you're going to get many more than 15 a year. So there really is not a rule of 15. Right now, we're in a boom time. There's probably more like a rule of 50. My estimate of the number of businesses worth funding in this era, if it was 40 in the 80s in the PC era, if it was 200 in the dot-com era, is around 1,000, which would tell you we're probably more like a rule of 50 to a rule of 100 right now. Now, what does this mean? If you go back to the rule of 15, you have two interesting strategies to play in venture to get outsized returns. Seed funds. You want to go early. You want to actually invest, almost spray and pray, option buying. Buy into as many seed companies as you can with a small amount of money, and then when they begin to emerge, double down, triple down your bet. It's like you're playing blackjack. Very successful strategy. Josh Koppelman of First Round Capital pioneered this strategy. He's done very, very well. For example, one of the unicorns they caught was Uber. The other strategy is, of course, the Andreessen Horowitz one. Wait, pay up when they emerge. Now, back when this was starting, there were only 20 seed funds. So a seed fund could have a good shot at getting into a lot of the rule of 15 or rule of 50 companies. When there's 200 seed funds, does this strategy really work? Go over here. Okay. There's many more VCs playing that big money game, but worse than that, if there's 50 and not 12, can even Andreessen Horowitz put enough money in all 50 to play the game? No. So I think both strategies, like all strategies, have been faded by the market and are not actually the right way to go. When we started Bullpen, Paul told you some of the story of that. We asked this question: what if we could predict the 15 or 50 before they emerge? So what post-seed really is that strategy. It's not a stage. It's that strategy. And we like really smart founders who are trying to gamify the whole system and avoid putting an A on until they get to a supersized round. Because the whole post-seed strategy is to find those emerging companies quickly and then take them to a supersized round. Now, in making this work, we found three things that are not obvious. Number one, You're going to see a lot of deal flow. There's not really proprietary deal flow anymore, even though people say there is. We've had a democratization of deal flow. You can almost see anything you want. You have to filter it really quickly because you can't spend a lot of your time kissing a lot of frogs. Number two, we found that picking is more important than deal flow. Traditional venture conventional wisdom, like rule of 15, is deal flow, deal flow, deal flow. That's how you get into all the good deals. Well, if you can see everything, it's not deal flow. How do you pick? How do you actually pick a company that a year on will get a supersized round? It's not easy or obvious how to do that. It takes a lot of work. The third thing is we found that these companies don't just take off. It's not like they're all magical companies. The old venture industry was very hands-on. The post-seed industry has to be very hands-on. We have a lot of companies that we do the twist on, I call it. We don't do pivots. When you pivot, you're restarting. It's really a reseed. Let the seed guys do that. But when you're past all your pivots, you still often need to twist. Change your business a little bit to come up with the billion-dollar opportunity. So we're very active as that relief pitcher out of the bullpen for about a year to get them there. Now, how are they doing? This is the scorecard of venture capital. There's a lot of venture people in this room. You all want the limited partners to think we're in Lake Wobegon, every venture fund is above average. We're not. This comes from Correlation Ventures. The data is stunningly awful. Okay. 2/3 of all venture-backed companies don't return capital. 2/3 fail or get acqui-hired and disappear. 25% return a little bit, 1 to 5x. You can't pay back a $400 million fund in 1 to 5x's. Singles, doubles, they don't do it. Only 10% return more than 5x and actually return the fund. Now, the best venture funds historically have a ratio more like 1/3 fail, 1/3 have modest returns, 1/3 kick butt. So that's the funds that are in the upper half of Lake Wobegon. So let me give you a quick scorecard on how we think post-seed's going to do. Hello. This is a list of our better of the first 40 deals we did over our first 2 funds. We've had 4 IPOs. You probably recognize all of them. So at one point, the top 3 were over $1 billion. I think Zynga still is. 2 moguls running that way. We have 4 that look like they could be billion-dollar potentials, unicorns. They're all running. FanDuel is our favorite. Tanium's at $900 million. It's one of these supersized rounds of Andreessen Horowitz where they put $90 million in. That's a supersized day. And we have about 8 that are already over 5x. Some of them have already realized the return, some haven't. So I say to myself, if this is all how it works out, we're going to have 40% over 5x. We'll be beating the upper echelon of the Lake Wobegon world. You know, stuff happens in the venture world. I think some of these guys aren't going to make it. So we're pretty confident that post-seed as a strategy can get a fund to a 1/3, 1/3 mix. So that's it. I hope this is clear to everybody. Post-seed is a strategy. The rest of the sessions here are all meant to talk about how do you do that strategy, what are some of the issues you run into. Hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. And please, if you want to ask any questions, find me walking around. I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you.